on the other side of the screen. In the meantime, a bombshell report from the New York Times reveals new details about stores of chemical weapons uncovered in Iraq between 2004 and 2011. Not only were the discoveries kept secret, but on at least 6 occasions, troops encountering these chemical weapons were injured. To keep the revelations hidden, these soldiers were often denied necessary care and were not recognized for their wounds. The details have reignited the debate over the case for war in Iraq and whether the 2003 invasion was ultimately necessary. Critics, however, maintain the weapons found were not the same as ones used in the justification for war. All right, so this is an interesting story. A lot of people talking about it. Let's break it down. Dana, I want to get your reaction.
Well, I'm actually confused by the story, and I'm confused by our intro, because I read it. I thought, I don't really think this is news. I have not seen the FOIA documents, that's Freedom of Information Request documents that the New York Times says that they have on the intel side of things. I do remember reports that old WMD were found, but I don't remember, I've never seen any evidence about people being injured and then not being allowed to talk about that. Perhaps the New York Times has that, and it's solid. It's just not something that I was familiar with. And also, if there was WMD found and if these people were injured, I would think under the enormous pressure the Bush administration was under in order to justify war, that then they would have actually said, we found this WMD. So it doesn't make sense to me. But I do think there's something very important here. The New York Times is trying to rewrite history, and they're trying to put in place an idea in people's minds and solidify it that George W. Bush went to war thinking that Saddam Hussein had a new weapons program. He never said that. And Gabriel Mallour of Ace of Spades did an amazing job of breaking down, taking President Bush's speeches and showing what President Bush said is what the world said in 1998 National Intelligence Estimate, that Saddam Hussein had weapons, and he had a propensity to try to reconstitute a program. That was what they went to the UN for, that's what they went to Congress for, and that's what they went to war for.
That was the case for war.
That was the case. So they're mixing apples and oranges, and I'm confused by the New York Times story and why it is such a big deal. But again, I haven't seen this secret intelligence FOIA document that they say that they have.
That's the basis for their story. Go ahead, Bob.
There's something to keep in mind here. Those were mostly mustard gas canisters that they were found. They were helped put those together by the West when they were fighting the Iraqis, when they were fighting the Iranians. They used an enormous amount of those weapons during the war with Iran. 1 million people died during that. So I'm not at all surprised that they would find an old catch of those around. The real issue is, was there a new program? And the answer was there was not a new program. But that was, I agree with you. I mean, that was not, I never heard the word new used from Bush. So I don't.
But the New York Times makes that case. That's what their lead is. They try to say that President Bush did say that, and he didn't.
I would find it amazing if these guys, A, didn't get care, and B, this hadn't leaked before now.
Eric.
I can just point out, we said that it reignited the debate. Why is there a debate anyway? Here, Saddam Hussein, I mean, is there any question that he was a bad guy? He was a dictator who mass murdered his own people, government-approved mass murder, torture, and rape, sometimes up to several 100,000, some people say. New York Times actually says up to 1 million using the mustard gas on his own people. So he actually had a dirty dozen, and I think the Bush administration went to war, correct me if I'm wrong, with the dirty dozen, not the Iraqi people, with Saddam Hussein, the 5 or 6 or so security people, the top advisors, and the 2 sons. That's who we were trying to eliminate, not go to war with the Iraqi people.
Like the plane.
So who cares if there was a weapon of mass destruction or not? The guy was bad. He killed his own people.
The question is, there are a lot of bad people in the world. The question is, do you go to war against them? Those of us on this side who are against the war.
Have that debate.
Okay,
but don't say they went to war for weapons of mass destruction. That's a different debate completely.
Well, wait a minute. They didn't go to war for a new program of weapons of mass destruction. Colin Powell went to the UN and said that they have the ability to build these things. And
certainly had demonstrated the propensity to do so and use them, not just to design them and manufacture them, but actually to employ them against their own people.
Yeah. Well, and also, let's keep in mind, I said about the Iranians, that was something we pushed very hard for them to do.
There's plenty. I've always felt there was plenty of evidence. I mean, they gassed thousands of people. What's your definition of weapons of mass destruction? There were 2,400 nerve agent rockets. I guess in the world where we call Fort Hood workplace violence, that's nothing more than Roman candles. I mean, this stuff was deadly, and I agree with Eric. It was part of the reason everybody, including the Clintons, wanted Hussein dead. They wanted him dead. His death should be roundly cheered. It was a great accomplishment. And when we look back long after we're dead, that will be looked upon
you
as
think,
a
given
great
the
thing.
circumstances there now in that area, that was worthwhile?
I mean, this is a guy, too, that used the Kurdish people in northern Iraq as his test subjects for VX gas. I mean, the unbelievable atrocity. So now to sit in judgment and say, oh, well, this was the reason they made, you know what, come on.
Well,
Let's remember there was no fly zone. They weren't getting to the Kurds at that point.
I think but I do think, Bob, to your point, though, that I do believe that a premature withdrawal in that area by President Obama, that decision has led to the problems that we have there now with ISIS. And that's the point of the New York Times story, is that ISIS is now getting its hands on these old weapons and could use it against innocent people.
I hear what you're saying about that, and I think there's something to be said about it, but I counter with this, which is we wouldn't have had to draw back people if we hadn't gone to war there in the first place.
Right, so
I mean, okay, you've always been anti-war, and that's great. Being anti-war is great because you can always say you're going to be anti-war no matter what happens. But at a certain point, when you need to get rid of somebody, and a person that invaded Kuwait, and a person who killed thousands, and after that led to chaos, but it was a lot better off before Obama let it go to hell.
And nobody likes to do nothing.
I would say, just in response to that George H.W. Bush made the decision not to follow it to get Hussein, and because he thought it was something that, if I remember Colin Powell saying, if you break it, you have to keep it.
It's the Pottery Barn rule.
We're done with this, yes.